We're ready for the background stitch, and this is a Milanese stitch. A Milanese stitch is a satin stitch triangle, and so I want to begin in the outer corner and stitch toward the border. I think that will be an easier count, but first you have to find the outer corner. So just take the tip of your needle and trace along in the channel, and then this channel from tip to tip, and I've slightly enlarged the hole so that I can see it better. So this is my outside corner. So my first stitch is going to be not in this corner, but just under the corner. And I'm using 2 strands of the cotton floss. I separated out 2 strands and one at a time, and then recombined them in the needle. This is an overdyed thread, and usually you want to make sure that your overdyes are going in the same direction, but for this one, because the color changes are very, very subtle, if you don't quite get it, I think it'll be okay. Okay, so now I'm just making satin stitch triangles. Stacked in a row. And I will continue stitching these until I run into the border. A Milanese stitch, this particular, they can be different shapes and different sizes. For this one, I'm having 4 lines that get progressively longer, and then I start over again. Okay, so now I've got 3 triangles done, and I want to show you something about the triangles that will help you stitch these. You'll notice that all of your endpoints are in a straight line. And as you stack them into a row, these endpoints, the longest endpoints, also line up in a diagonal row. This will help to keep you straight as you stitch, so hopefully you won't have to rip. The diagram in the book shows you beginning in the upper left corner. You can begin there, or you can begin in any of the corners. They're all stitched exactly the same. Once you have established how to stitch the Milanese stitch, you probably won't need to look at the book, because you'll just stitch the Milanese triangles until you run into the border. At the edges, there are compensating stitches. Compensating stitches are stitches to complete the pattern. They kind of fool the eye a little bit, but they're not complete stitches. You make them in the same order as the pattern that you're stitching, but they're shorter. I have diagrammed the whole corner for you. It's in the book, so you don't have to worry about where do you compensate, how do you compensate. It's all right there for you. I'm using 2 strands. I think 2 strands of floss covers well on 18 count canvas, and there is enough thread included in the kit to do this. If you want to use more strands, you will run out of thread. There will not be enough to use more strands. Now, you could just, if you just insist that you have to have more coverage, you could substitute just plain white cotton floss, and it will, since the overdye is so subtle, for the color changes are so subtle in this particular overdye, I think you would be okay if you just used plain white. Okay, now I'm to my knot, so I'm going to clip it off and just continue stitching. When I get to the end of a length, I will weave it through the threads that are on the back. But I will probably begin every length with an away knot, just to reduce the amount of threads that get woven into the back, to run the risk of dislodging the threads that are on the front. I mean, I'm taking all this time and trouble to very carefully lay them so that they're very flat and smooth, so I don't want to disrupt them. And I can do an away knot from the front and not have to flip my canvas over. The more you flip your canvas over, the more time it takes. And so I'm a big one for reducing the amount of time that it takes to stitch. So if it doesn't take you as long to stitch, that means you get to do another project. Yay! Okay, so now I've run into the upright rice stitch border. So now I'm going to stitch triangles that are the reverse order. It's still the same shape. It's still the same 4 lines that get progressively longer. And I am stitching to meet the previous stitches. So that's all there is to this background. I'm going to continue stitching. I'll finish this off camera, and then I'll come back and show you the finished project.